Forget the singing crabs and their happy endings. What if I told you The Little Mermaid wasn't a fairy tale, but a tragedy? The original story is darker, deeper, and full of sacrifices that don't lead to a happily ever after. Ready to dive into the haunting truth behind the waves? Let's uncover the real tale. Hello and welcome back to Ladies of Lore, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of all of the women from mythology and folklore that shaped our culture, both past and present. Thank you so much for tuning in to what will be the third episode in our little mini Disney series. I really hope you've been enjoying these as much as I've loved making them. So, as I'm sure you probably guessed, today we are plunging into the depths of the ocean to explore the fascinating history and evolution of Ariel, the Little Mermaid. Ariel isn't just a character in a Disney movie. She has such a rich legacy that stretches back nearly 2 centuries and reflects the currents of social change, art, and even feminism. So, grab your fins, or maybe your coffee, and let's swim into this compelling tale. Our story begins in 1837, when Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, whose fairy tale, The Little Mermaid, first introduced the world to this underwater heroine. The plot was drawn from Andersen's imagination rather than a specific folktale. However, Andersen's writing was influenced by traditional folklore about merfolk and water nymphs, and if you'd like an episode on those at some point, just let me know. Unlike the vibrant, adventurous Ariel we know today, Andersen's mermaid is a much more tragic figure. She sacrifices her voice, endures excruciating pain for her legs, and faces the looming possibility of death, all for an unrequited love with a human prince. And actually, Andersen's mermaid story reflects his own struggles with identity, love, and rejection. Scholars often speculate that Andersen, who was never married, poured his feelings of longing and heartbreak, possibly tied to a forbidden love, into this very tale. At its core, The Little Mermaid is about yearning for something unobtainable, a theme that many of us can resonate with, even today. And when you get some context about Andersen, this definitely makes sense. Andersen's struggles were one of a heart unsettled, and at war with itself. By all biographical evidence, he died a virgin, but this did not mean that he didn't have some very extreme and very intense feelings. For many years, he was infatuated with the Swedish opera singer Jenny Lind. And isn't that the same? Is Jenny Lind the opera singer from The Greatest Showman? I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I feel like that name rings a bell. Anyway, he later went on to fall in love with the Grand Duke of Weimar. But the real passionate love of his lifetime was Edvard Collin. Hans Christian Andersen met Edvard Collin in the early 1830s. Collin, the practical, stoic son of one of Andersen's key patrons, Jonas Collin, was everything Andersen was not. Where Andersen was sensitive, imaginative, and effusive, Edvard was reserved and pragmatic. Yet Andersen formed a very intense attachment to him, one that many historians believe was romantic in nature. Andersen's letters to Edvard reveal this attachment in vivid and emotional detail. Here's an excerpt from one of his letters written in 1835. I languish for you as a pretty Calabrian wench. My sentiments for you are those of a woman. the femininity of my nature and our friendship must remain a mystery." That language is striking, filled with longing and vulnerability. It's clear that Andersen felt deeply for Edvard in a way that went way beyond the boundaries of friendship. But Edvard, as we know from his own writings, did not share these feelings. The relationship faced its most significant test when Edvard announced his engagement to Henriette Thyberg. For Andersen, this news was devastating. He saw Edvard's marriage as the ultimate rejection, a final blow in his dream of emotional closeness with his friend. In a letter written shortly after learning of the engagement, Andersen poured his heart out on the paper. "Your engagement is like a knife to my heart. You have chosen another to share your life with, and I must remain on the outside, alone. Will you still think of me? Or will I be forgotten as you build your new happiness?" Edvard, ever pragmatic, responded in a tone that reflected his perspective on Andersen's feelings. He wrote, "Hans, your place in my life will not change because of my marriage, but I cannot give you the devotion you seek. It is not in my nature. My duties now lie with Henriette, and I hope you will understand this." For Andersen, understanding this was very much easier said than done, and he spiraled into a period of emotional turmoil, retreating into his writing to process his grief. But even in the face of this heartbreak, Andersen didn't sever his connection to Edvard. Instead, he channeled his emotions into his work and maintained their friendship, though it was never the same. Andersen's later letters to Edvard oscillated between affection and melancholy, as he grappled with the reality of their unbalanced relationship. One particularly poignant letter from this period reveals Andersen's lingering pain and his attempt to reconcile with Edvard's new life. He wrote, "Though I cannot be at the centre of your world, I wish only for your happiness. I will remain in the shadows, cherishing what moments of warmth you can offer me." Edvard's responses remain polite but distant, a reflection of his pragmatic nature. He reassured Andersen of his enduring friendship, but made it very clear that his primary commitment was to his wife and his family. Over time, Andersen seemed to almost accept this, though the wounds never truly healed. And you might be wondering, India, why are you telling me this? Why are we reading his letters? Well, what's really remarkable is how this experience shaped Andersen's storytelling. Tales like The Nightingale and The Snow Queen explore themes of longing and loss and the complexities of love in ways that feel deeply personal. The Nightingale, for instance, tells the story of a bird who sings so beautifully that it moves an emperor to tears, but it flies away when it realizes its place is not in the gilded cage of the court. It's easy to see parallels between the bird's sorrowful departure and Andersen's own struggle to accept his place in Edvard's life. Andersen's later years brought him fame and recognition, but his letters revealed that his feelings for Edvard lingered quietly in his heart. Edvard, for his part, reflected on their bond with a sense of ambivalence. After his death, Edvard wrote of Andersen, "He loved me in a way I could not understand or return, yet I respected him and I valued our friendship, even when it caused him suffering. His genius was undeniable, but his heart too tender for this world." These words underscore the enduring complexity of their relationship, a connection marked by mutual respect, but fundamentally mismatched desires. Andersen's longing for Edvard remained unfulfilled, and yet it became inspiration for some of his most beautiful and enduring stories, with many scholars believing this experience directly influenced one of his most famous tales, The Little Mermaid. In The Little Mermaid, the protagonist sacrifices everything, her voice, her family, her very identity, for the chance to be with a prince who ultimately marries someone else. The mermaid's unrequited love and her ultimate transformation into sea foam speak to Andersen's own feelings of self-sacrifice and unfulfilled longing for Edvard. But the story's backdrop is also significant. The 19th century was a time of rigid gender roles and a romanticised view of sacrifice, especially for women. Andersen's Mermaid becomes a metaphor for the silent endurance and self-denial often expected of women during that era. So now I've talked your ear off about all of that, would you like me to tell you the story? The story begins in the underwater kingdom of a sea king, where his 6 daughters, the mermaid princesses, live in a grand palace made of coral and pearls. The youngest, the Little Mermaid, is the most beautiful and curious of them all. She has a deep fascination with the human world, collecting objects that fall from ships and eagerly listening to her grandmother's stories about humans. Each mermaid is allowed to visit the surface when she turns 15. The Little Mermaid dreams of her turn and longs to see the world above the waves. When the Little Mermaid finally ascends to the surface, she sees a handsome young prince celebrating his birthday aboard a ship. She watches with fascination, and when a sudden storm wrecks the ship, she rescues him. Carrying him to shore, she places him near a temple and watches as a young woman from the temple finds him and revives him. The prince never sees the Little Mermaid and believes the temple girl saved his life. Deeply in love with the prince, the Little Mermaid grows despondent. She asks her grandmother about human life and learns that humans have immortal souls, unlike mermaids, who live for 300 years but dissolve into sea foam upon death. The only way for a mermaid to gain a soul is to marry a human, for part of his soul would pass to her. Desperate to become human and win the prince's love, she visits the Sea Witch, a sinister figure who agrees to grant her wish. The price, however, is steep. She must give up her beautiful voice in exchange for human legs. Additionally, every step she takes on land will feel like walking on sharp knives. If she fails to win the prince's love and marry him, she will die and dissolve into sea foam. Despite the risks, the Little Mermaid agrees and drinks the potion given to her by the Sea Witch. The Little Mermaid wakes on the shore as a human, where the prince finds her. Though she cannot speak, her grace and beauty captivate him, and they become close companions. However, the prince does not see her as a romantic partner. He is still infatuated with the woman that he believes saved him, the temple girl. The Little Mermaid suffers silently, enduring the pain of walking and the heartbreak of unrequited love. Tragically, the prince falls in love with the temple girl and announces his intention to marry her. The Little Mermaid's heart breaks, as this means she will die and become sea foam the day after his wedding. That night, her sisters visit her with a desperate offer. They have given their hair to the Sea Witch in exchange for a magical dagger. If the Little Mermaid kills the prince with the dagger and lets his blood spill onto her feet, she will become a mermaid again and avoid death. The Little Mermaid takes the dagger, but cannot bring herself to harm the prince. As dawn breaks, she throws the dagger into the sea and jumps in after it, dissolving into the foam. Instead of ceasing to exist, the Little Mermaid becomes a daughter of the air, a spirit who can gain an immortal soul through good deeds. She's given the chance to earn her place in heaven by helping humanity for 300 years, symbolising a form of spiritual redemption. So, there it is. Pretty unlike the version that you might know. Andersen's Little Mermaid doesn't offer a conventional happy ending. However, her ultimate transcendence into a spirit of the air offers a little bit of bittersweet hope. Her sacrifice and her goodness allow her to achieve spiritual immortality, even if her earthly dreams go unfulfilled. And that's very different to the version that you know, which is the Disney version. So why don't we have a bit of a look at that? In the 1930s, Walt Disney himself considered adapting The Little Mermaid as an animated short, but ultimately shelved the idea. Fast forward a few decades to 1989, and Ron Clements rediscovered the story and proposed it as an animated film. Alongside John Musker, Ron directed The Little Mermaid and gave us a radically different Ariel, transforming the silent, sacrificial mermaid into a feisty, independent, and adventurous teenager. She dreams of exploring the human world, not for a prince, but for herself. And though the original tale had a tragic ending, Disney's team decided to create a bit of a more optimistic version, aligning it with their tradition of animated musicals. And this movie was an absolutely massive success, reviving Disney's animation studio and launching the Disney Renaissance, a period of creative and commercial triumph. And definitely the period where the best Disney movies were made, for sure. And Ariel quickly became a beloved cultural icon, spawning merchandise and sequels, theme park attractions, and even a Broadway adaptation. Ariel's look was inspired by live-action footage of Sherry Stoner, a young actress who helped animators capture Ariel's fluid movements and her personality. Her distinctive red hair, which was a change from the traditional blonde depictions of mermaids, made her visually unique and memorable. Jodie Benson provided Ariel's voice, infusing the character with warmth and relatability. Benson singing, particularly on the iconic song Part of Your World, expressed Ariel's yearning for freedom and self-discovery. Alan Menken and Howard Ashman's musical score played a pivotal role in shaping Ariel's character. Songs like Part of Your World conveyed her dreams and her desires, giving her a voice even when the plot silenced her. Ashman, known for his work on Broadway, encouraged a character-driven approach to the songwriting, which really helped Ariel's motivations shine through. Andersen's mermaid is defined by self-sacrifice and silent suffering, but Disney's Ariel is active, vocal, and assertive. In Disney's version, Ariel's fascination with the human world and her desire for freedom take centre stage, and while she falls in love with Prince Eric, her pursuit of life on land is driven primarily by her curiosity and her longing for independence. Ariel makes her own decisions, including the choice to visit Ursula and trade her voice for legs. And though her decisions have consequences, she's not portrayed as a passive victim of circumstance. And speaking of the voice, in both versions, yes, Ariel does lose her voice, but the implications are a little bit different. In Andersen's story, the loss of the voice represents the silencing and subjugation of women in patriarchal societies. But in the Disney version, Ariel's voice is emphasised as her most powerful attribute. Her singing wins Prince Eric's heart, and her loss of voice creates tension as she must reclaim it to fully realise her dreams. And we all know that Disney's Little Mermaid has a happy ending. She achieves her dreams and she marries Prince Eric and reconciles with her father. And this upbeat conclusion reflects Disney's goal of creating a more family-friendly narrative with a more universal appeal. And we see this across the board. That's what we said about Sleeping Beauty. The endings are often changed from this dark, moralistic tone to a more family-friendly, sort of round conclusion. And Ariel marked a significant departure from early Disney princesses like Snow White and Cinderella, who are often a bit more passive and reactive. Ariel was proactive, adventurous, and willing to challenge authority. Ariel defied her father's expectations and the norms of her underwater world, pursuing her dreams on her own terms. This reflected a growing cultural shift towards celebrating women's independence and self-expression. And unlike traditional princesses, Ariel was portrayed as imperfect and relatable. She made mistakes. She argued with her father, and she acted impulsively, which resonated very much with young girls in the audience. And the character of Ariel paved the way for future Disney heroines like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, Mulan, and Moana. And these characters expanded on Ariel's legacy, emphasising self-discovery, agency, and diverse cultural representation. The film sparked discussions about gender roles and representation in media, encouraging Disney and other studios to evolve their storytelling. The making of The Little Mermaid redefined the Disney princess archetype and reflected changing societal values around women's agency and independence. And Ariel remains a symbol of curiosity, of courage, and the pursuit of dreams, making her one of the most beloved and complex figures in Disney's pantheon. And her influence is still felt today. So let's have a bit of a look at the impact of The Little Mermaid and how things have changed over time. The cultural impact of The Little Mermaid is vast, influencing literature, art, film, and even social discourse since its publication in 1837, not just since the Disney version. The tale has transcended its origins as a Danish fairy tale to become a global cultural touchstone. Andersen's The Little Mermaid inspired countless retellings, adaptations, and reinterpretations across various different cultures. The story's theme of longing, sacrifice, and transformation have quite a universal appeal, making it a favourite subject for writers and storytellers. By the late 19th century, The Little Mermaid and Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales were very well known by English readers, and writer Oscar Wilde was an avid but not uncritical reader of Andersen's work. Wilde wrote The Fisherman and His Soul as a response to The Little Mermaid. The literary fairy tale takes a bit of a different approach to Andersen's mermaid narrative. It's kind of a reversal of Andersen's story. The Fisherman and His Soul features a human fisherman who gives up his soul to marry a mermaid. Without his soul, the fisherman spends happy years living beneath the sea with his mermaid love. But his soul is not so easily discarded. The soul returns, but it cannot re-enter the fisherman's heart, for it is too full of love for the mermaid. And most other retellings of The Little Mermaid tell a tale of an often doomed romantic love. But there are some exceptions to this. The illustrator Jerry Pinkney has also retold the story of The Little Mermaid, but this time focusing instead on the friendship and self-growth of the tale. Pinkney says he found The Little Mermaid an intriguing yet daunting story, because he found the plot to be out of step with the times. Today's readers are seeking their own true paths, blazing new trails. Pinkney's adaptation tells the story of the young mermaid Melody. Melody is curious about life on land, and her explorations result in her befriending a human girl. The sea witch is still a threat, but Melody manages to defeat her all by herself. The importance of Melody regaining her voice is also emphasised, and the story ends with Melody resolving to never give it up again for anyone or anything. And the story has also been a focal point for feminist critiques and reinterpretations, particularly in the 20th and 21st centuries. Feminist scholars view The Little Mermaid's loss of her voice as a metaphor for women's historical silencing and lack of agency. The mermaid's willingness to endure pain and risk death for the prince has been analysed as a reflection of patriarchal ideals that glorify female self-sacrifice. Modern adaptations often give the mermaid more agency, presenting her as a symbol of independence and self-discovery rather than a tragic figure. In the world of art, the iconic Little Mermaid statue in Copenhagen, unveiled in 1913, has become a symbol of Denmark and of Andersen's legacy. It attracts millions of visitors annually and embodies the story's melancholic beauty. Countless paintings and sculptures depict the Little Mermaid, emphasising her ethereal and otherworldly nature. And I'm going to leave you some links in the show notes as per usual, so you can have a little look at those yourself. And not only this, The Little Mermaid has inspired numerous ballets, symphonies, operas. It's really influenced it all. Honestly, it really has. You don't understand the depth of the influence that The Little Mermaid has actually had. until you start researching it. And now we're going to talk about the Disney live action adaptation. Now, I know I spoke about the Mulan one last week. I'm not really a fan of Disney live action adaptations. I really am not. I don't think there's one that I've actually really liked. And I love Disney. I really do. But I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan. What do you guys think of the Disney live action adaptations? Let me know in the comments. What do you think? But the 2023 live action adaptation of The Little Mermaid sparked debates about diversity and representation, with Halle Bailey's casting as Ariel being hailed as a step towards inclusivity. And there was a lot of discourse online about this, and we're seeing it right now as well. They've just released the trailer for How to Train Your Dragon, and one of the characters is played by a woman of colour, and in the original animation she's white. And these things always blow my mind because they're not real. Guys, they're not real. It's not a real thing. They're not real. So calm down. I actually thought Halle Bailey did a very good job. Despite not being a big fan of the live adaptation, she did do a good job. So yeah, I feel like everybody should be included in all kinds of movies, all kinds of media. We should see an accurate representation of the community that's watching it. You can't get mad because a fictional mermaid, right? Also, mermaids aren't real. Heads up. You can't be mad because they're being played by a person of colour. Think of all the little girls that could watch this film and see themselves in the character of Ariel now. Just because that's there now doesn't take away from the original one, just a bit different. And if you don't like it, don't watch it. Anyway, I got on my soapbox. I feel like I do that once an episode. I'm very sorry for that. I think it's because I feel comfortable with you guys. I feel like I can just yap. Probably should stop. So the Little Mermaid's connection to the ocean has also made her a symbol for marine conservation. Ariel and her story are often invoked in campaigns to protect marine ecosystems, highlighting the beauty and the fragility of underwater worlds. Organisations like WWF and Greenpeace have occasionally actually used mermaid imagery in their initiatives to evoke empathy for the seas. And Andersen's tale resonates universally, leading to adaptations across cultures. The story's themes align with Japanese aesthetics and narratives about beauty, sacrifice, and unrequited love, inspiring manga, anime, and films like Ponyo by Studio Ghibli. And the story also aligns with Slavic myths about water spirits, influencing Russian literature and folklore retellings. And the mermaid is often merged with figures like Mummy Wata in African mythology, blending Andersen's story with more indigenous traditions. And finally, and not really surprisingly, given that we've spoken about this for half the podcast, Andersen's tale has been embraced by the LGBTQ+ community, as it reflects themes of longing for acceptance and longing for love in the face of societal constraints. Andersen himself is believed to have infused his story with his own feelings of unrequited love, outsider status, and possible queerness. So, from feminist critiques to environmental campaigns, Andersen's The Little Mermaid remains a living story that evolves with each generation. Its ability to inspire, provoke thought, and adapt to contemporary issues ensures its cultural relevance for years to come. Ariel's story, whether told through Andersen's pen, Disney's animation, or modern reimaginings, remind us that myths and fairy tales have to evolve. They're reflections of the times in which they're told and retold. Ariel may have started out as a tragic figure of longing and sacrifice, but today she's an emblem of empowerment, individuality, and transformation. So, next time you hear someone humming Part of Your World or spot a mermaid statue by the sea, remember the rich history behind that iconic tale. Ariel's journey is more than a fairy tale. It's a mirror of our own evolving stories and values. Thank you so much for joining me again on this episode of Ladies of Lore. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please do hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button. Let me know what you think in the comments, or go and follow me over at Blue Sky, because I do tweet on there a little bit about me and my life and my dogs and what I've had to eat. So if you're interested, do go and follow me. Until next time though, please do keep yourselves warm. I'm very cold. I'm under a blanket recording this because I can't feel my hands. So I hope you're keeping warmer than me. So I shall see you next week, where we'll unravel another thread in the rich tapestry of women in mythology and folklore.